Which weapon should I play? I mean, not everyone has the time and the luxury to take a closer look into every single weapon. Not like me, who has no real friends or other hobbies, and played a lot with and against all of the different weapons we currently have in the game. So this video should help you to find the weapon that might fit you the most. Also a quick notice to that here. I won't be reading every single ability in this video. I don't want to bore you to death. This video will give you a quick and rough overview for all the general playstyles of each weapon and their strengths, and also what you can expect for each weapon and how it plays in general. I will also give some recommendations for weapon pairings, but note that those are only my suggestions, especially focused on new players. You can pair any weapon as you like. I will also show you the active core abilities so that you can have a quick overview on how the skills look like. And with all that said, for the beginning, let's go! If you ever wanted to be an heroic knight in shining armor to compensate for real life because you're 40 and still living in your mom's basement, or you just want to tank, then sword and shield is your kind of weapon. And not only can you tank with sword and shield, you can also play as a damage dealer, which is pretty awesome in my opinion. That is also why there are 3 types of shields: the round shield, the kite shield and the tower shield. The tower shield is for tanks and the round shield is for DPS, and the kite shield is a compromise of them both. Sword and shield uses strength as its main attribute, but you can also use it with dexterity. The playstyle of the sword and shield is a rather slow to medium paced one because you really rely a lot on blocking attacks and playing a little bit more defensive, which gets rewarded by some passives and perks. Though most of your attacks are pretty fast when it comes to the animation speed in comparison to other weapon types. The strength of sword and shield is definitely the ability to block range attacks, which no other weapon in New World can. You also have the best stun we currently have in New World with sword and shield. And if you are someone who takes his pleasure by knowing your enemy is raging the fuck out because he can't get away from you, you might be pleased to hear that sword and shield uses slows in some of its abilities and passives, as well as for the light chain finishers. In general, sword and shield has some awesome buffs for group members and some really nice debuffs for enemies. The abilities of sword and shield. Reverse stab, an ability that is rather slow in animation speed, but if skilled, uninterruptible with a lot of damage. You also reduce your other sword and shield cooldowns with it if you hit. Whirling Blade, a fast AoE attack with good damage, and Rend as a debuff. Leaping Strike, an awesome gap closer with good damage which you can also use as a finisher if skilled, and you also slow enemies if you hit them in the back if skilled. But right now, this ability has some hitbox issues. Shield Bash, the best stun in the game with a total of 3 seconds, which can be an eternity in PvP. This ability is also usable as a taunt if you have a taunt gem on your sword. Shield Rush, you could also use this ability as a gap closer, but with a lot less range when compared to Leaping Strike. Though if you skill this ability, it can weaken enemies and slows them in an AoE radius on hit. Defiant Stance. This skill is one of the most important ones if you are a tank, because you reduce incoming damage by a total of 30% for 8 seconds, and if skilled, the damage mitigation even increases to a total of 50%, and you get a small self-heal after the ability ends. Some weapons you could use with sword and shield are the Great Axe, the Warhammer, which is a pretty nice combo for sword and shield, the Spear, or the Rapier. But as I said, there are much more possibilities and more exotic combos, as the Paladin build, for example, who uses a life staff in combination with sword and board. If you are someone who has ADHD and or likes to roll his face over the keyboard to hit as many keys as fast as possible, then the Rapier with its very fast attacks and breathtaking short cooldowns is the perfect weapon for you. This weapon is mainly used by damage dealers, but could also be equipped as a secondary weapon for tanks. The Rapier mainly uses dexterity, but also can be played with intelligence. As I already said, the Rapier is a very fast weapon which uses evades and or bleeds to kill their enemies. So if you are someone who likes to watch your enemies run away and panic while bleeding to death, then Rapier is also your kind of weapon. Tondo, a bleed that has a rather big range for a melee attack, which is stackable 3 times and is ought to be used with the next ability, Flourish and Finish. This attack is a knockback ability that has grit, which makes you uninterruptible, with a finisher when you press light attack again, which will launch you forward and will consume all bleeds that are stacked from Tondo on your target, which triggers all bleeds immediately as burst damage. Flurry, a quick burst of 5 very fast hits which extend the bleeds from Tondo if skilled. This ability can also stagger your opponent with its last hit. Riposte, the only counterattack we currently have, which represents kinda the no fuck you mentality. But the enemy can dodge or block the stun if timed correctly. If you use a taunt gem on your Rapier, you could also taunt with this ability. Evade, this ability is an interrupt for yourself, and what I mean by that is that you can cancel every ability or light or even heavy attack you are currently doing with evade. Not only that, but you can also use this ability to dodge enemies' attacks or to increase your damage for 1 hit if skilled. This ability has not really a cooldown if you hit your light attacks consistently, and you regain stamina with this ability if skilled. Weapons I would recommend in combination with the Rapier are the Spear, Sword and Shield, the Ice or Void Gauntlet, Musket and or Bow. Maybe you're brain dead, have the reaction time of a dead turtle, or you just want to light click spam your enemies to death. Then the Hatchet might be the perfect weapon for you, because the Hatchet falls in the category easy to play but hard to master. The Hatchet is also a little bit like the Rapier, a very fast weapon which is also mainly used by damage dealers but can also be a great second choice for tanks. The Hatchet mainly scales with strength but could be also used with dexterity. What is different to the Rapier though are the cooldowns, because the cooldowns are a lot longer than the Rapier ones, but also have greater impact. The playstyle is very different for each skill tree. The left skill tree, Berserker, is a playstyle which is pretty fast and uses health buffs like empowering yourself or speed increases to kill your enemies. The right tree, Throwing, makes the Hatchet into a ranged weapon which focuses mainly on debuffing enemies into oblivion. Feral Rush. This is the gap closer of the Hatchet, which can be used as a small execute, like Leap from the Sword and Shield skill tree, if skilled roots the enemy when you hit them in the back. Berserk, the main ability of the Hatchet, because of the sheer power it has. When fully skilled, Berserk gives you a 20% speed increase, heals you for 30% of your health during its duration, makes your abilities uninterruptible, and removes all crowd control effects when activated. So everything you could wish for in an ability. The drawback is a rather long cooldown though. Raging Torrent is a bit like Flurry from the Rapier tree. Fast hits which if skilled grant you a movement speed increase and a 5th finisher attack. Now to the range abilities. Rending Throw, a quick hatchet throw which debuffs enemies. Social Distancing, the ability that summarizes the last 2 fucking years in an ability for New World. With this ability you get some distance by jumping backwards and slowing the enemy on hit. This ability gets stronger if skilled. Infected Throw, a throw that is pretty slow and reduces the target's healing efficiency and also reduces the target's damage. When skilled, this ability becomes an AoE. Weapons I would recommend pairing with the Hatchet, especially for new players, are Sword and Shield, the Rapier, the Bow, the Warhammer and the Great Axe. If you like to play a class or weapon that fuels the pure anger and hatred in an opponent that much that he is going to headbutt his monitor, do you want to have a playstyle that your opponent thinks he's watching a video instead of playing New World? Then the Spear is your new weapon. The Spear is a great weapon for damage dealers, and in addition to that is also a very strong secondary weapon for tanks because of its awesome debuffs it provides. This spear mainly uses dexterity as its attribute and strength as a secondary. The spear has a very CC heavy playstyle with a total of 3 direct CCs and a small one. You also have a mix of debuffs and bleeds on top of that. Furthermore, you also have some passives to get your stamina back very fast. The spear has a medium paced playstyle with some very quick light attacks in between. Cyclone, an AoE spin that knocks targets back and if skilled restores stamina. Javelin, an awesome spear throw that knocks enemies down if skilled. Sweep, also an ability to knock down enemies and to step them on the ground if skilled. Perforate, 3 very quick spear stabs that debuff enemies to take more damage and also staggers your opponent on the last hit of the ability. Skewer, a small gap closer that applies a heavy bleed. Vault Kick, a kick that stuns enemies, which you could also use to taunt if used with a taunt gem. Also buffs your damage and reduces cooldowns from the spear if skilled. The spear fits very well with Sword and Shield, and I created a build that I call Gladiator around this weapon pairing, which I will maybe release as a separate video in the future. This spear also fits the bow, musket and the hatchet. If the hatchet was not enough for you because you might need to compensate for something, or you just like to split scouts open the old-fashioned way, then the Great Axe might be something for you. The Great Axe is used by DPS and tanks alike because it can be used in many ways. The Great Axe goes for raw damage with a little bit of self heal when you crit. You are also using heavy attacks more often than with any other weapon in the game. So if you want to do a lot of damage, the Great Axe is your way to go. The abilities as well as the normal attack speed are one of the slowest in New World. The cooldowns are also rather long, and when it comes to attributes, the Great Axe scales exclusively with strength. The gap closer of the Great Axe, which can be cancelled at any time and does more damage if skilled. Reap, a pull to get foes to you, which also heals you for a little bit of the damage done if skilled. This ability can be used as a taunt if played with a taunt gem in your axe. Execute, the best and really only real execute that we currently have in the game, which is also one of the slowest attacks. It has a 100% crit chance against enemies below 30% health if skilled. Whirlwind, a AoE that does more spins the more enemies are in its reach. You are also mobile while using it. Maelstrom, a spinning attack that pulls enemies closer to you in an AoE fashion. Gravity Well, a vortex that holds enemy inside its bubble, kind of like Root if you ever played Overwatch and played Zarya, the Grav kind of ability, but in New World it also does some damage, and if skilled, standing in this vortex reduces their group members' damage taken. The Great Axe is an awesome addition to Sword and Shield and also fits a Warhammer or the Hatchet. If you want something big, like the Great Axe, but you would rather crush your enemies to death with their dreams and hopes and the wish of winning alongside with it, then the hammer is your weapon choice. The hammer is one of the best, if not the best, secondary weapon for tanks. But the Warhammer can also pack a punch if you play it as a damage dealer and especially excels in wars. The only attribute the hammer needs is strength. Furthermore, has the Warhammer, like the Great Axe, a slow playstyle, but a lot more CC abilities in comparison. Like a lot more, really a lot more. It's really annoying to fight against it. So if you like the idea of this spear playstyle, but you prefer it a little bit more heavy, then the hammer is your way to go. You also have a variety of different buffs and debuffs with the Warhammer. Though rather a slow playstyle, when it comes to the abilities the Warhammer has, the cooldowns have rather a medium length. Armor Breaker, an attack that ignores a portion of the enemy's armor and debuffs the target and gains grit if skilled. Mighty Gravel, an overhead attack that crushes enemies when hit. Gain haste after a successful hit and press light attack for a follow-up attack if skilled. Wrecking Ball, you strike the ground with this ability. If the target gets hit, you gain damage resistance and knocks down the enemy if skilled. Shockwave, a ground slam that can't be blocked, only dodged, which stuns enemies. Also applies a debuff if skilled. Can be used as a taunt if used with a taunt gem in the hammer. Clear Out, a hammer swing that knocks the target back. Also grants damage reduction and haste if skilled. Path of Destiny, an AoE ability that staggers targets if skilled. As already mentioned, the Warhammer is an awesome weapon for tanks, so a very good pairing is Sword and Shield, and the Great Axe is also a good match, as well as the Hatchet. The bow. If you're the kind of guy that likes to run away like a little bitch to not get hit while bug abusing, so your enemy does not even get a chance of fighting back, then the bow is your weapon. The bow scales exclusively with dexterity and is a projectile weapon with bullet drop, so you need to pre-aim and consider the drop of your arrows while shooting. The bow is a great single target weapon if you hit your shots consistently, that is. And in addition to that, the bow is also really good when it comes to AoE damage. The range the bow is played on reaches from short to medium distances. The playstyle is a rather fast one with medium to long cooldown timers. The bow is very strong, but if you get caught in a melee fight, you can get in trouble real quick. Poison Shot, an AoE dot that lasts 20 seconds. If skilled, deals 150% damage on direct hits and creates an AoE area that also applies the dot. Evade Shot, an escape ability that knocks targets back and applies haste if skilled. Rain of Arrows, another AoE attack that also applies bleed if skilled and causes a slow. Rapid Shot, 3 fast shots that make you immobile. The last shot causes a knockback on the enemy target. Penetrating Shot, a very fast arrow shot that passes through targets with a range of 100 meters or around about 330 feet. The damage of the arrow increases after each hit and deals more damage after a certain distance if skilled. Splinter Shot, an arrow that splits into 3 individual arrows after a certain distance, splits into 5 instead of 3 arrows, and reduces its own cooldown if skilled. The bow pairings I recommend are the spear, the rapier, or the hatchet. Do you miss those days when a 12-year-old kid insulted your mother in Nuketown because you quickscoped that little bitch with a 360?
That's right! Get no scopes! Get no scopes!
Then and the musket might give you a glimpse of that feeling back. The musket is a pure damage dealer weapon which scales mainly with dexterity and is also playable with intelligence. The musket is used on long range and the only hitscan weapon in New World. If you don't know what hitscan means, here a quick explanation. When you aim on a target and then fire your weapon, the bullet hits the target in that exact moment you fire. So the projectile of the musket has no travel time and hits instant, so it does not really have a projectile in that sense. The musket really excels on long ranges, but can also be very deadly on mid-range or even in close range if you have the right build and a good position. You also have only one attack type and not a light and heavy attack like other weapons, like the Hatchet or the bow for example. So the musket playstyle is a mixed one. You can play it fast, like run and gun, or more slow and static as a sniper. Powder burn, a strong dot ability that increases follow-up damage if skilled. Also, the dot you apply lasts longer if it is a headshot. Power shot, a powerful shot that deals 150% weapon damage instead of only 100%. Gain in power and does slightly more damage if skilled. Headshots reduce cooldowns if skilled. Shooter stance, a static kneeling position with reduced reload time. Extends from 3 to 5 shots if skilled. Also reduces all other musket cooldowns if you hit the same target 3 times in a row without missing a shot. Stopping power, a shot that staggers a target and knocks it back. Also slows target and reduces stamina regeneration if skilled. Traps, a trap that roots enemies in place for 3 seconds. Damage gets increased by 20% and heals you for 100% damage dealt to the rooted enemy if skilled. Also if skilled, you are able to use 2 traps at once. Sticky bomb, the Semtex of New World. A bomb that sticks to your enemy and deals a shit ton of damage. After 3 seconds, grants stamina when hitting a target and slows for 3 seconds if skilled. The musket has some very interesting pairings because it does not only scale with dexterity but also with intelligence. So you can use the rapier, spear or hatchet with it, or a bow if you want to play just only range, but also an ice gauntlet, fire staff or void gauntlet, which brings us to our next weapon, the fire staff. If you ever wanted to attend a heretics burning but always missed your chance, you can now take matters into your own hands, literally, with the fire staff. The fire staff is used by damage dealers and scales with intelligence only. The range the fire staff is played on reaches from mid to short or even close range. The cooldown length is rather short with some medium cooldowns in between. The fire staff applies a lot of dots, which are called burning, but also has some great burst potential. The fire staff has also some AoE capabilities. You also have mana, which you need to spend for abilities. So this is a little different if you want to play a magicka based weapon. Pillar of Fire, an ground AoE burst that can't be blocked even with a shield, which increases in damage on full health targets if skilled. Also gets mana back for each enemy if skilled. Meteor Shower, a rain of fire which does AoE damage and gains grit, increases in damage and gives mana back if skilled. Fireball, a big fireball that deals initial damage when hit and applies a AoE area which damages people when they are standing in it. Reduces cooldowns and gives mana back on a direct hit if skilled. Incinerate, if you ever wanted to feel like Gandalf, this ability is for you.
Shall not pass!
by punching your staff into the ground and creating an AoE area around you that does damage, also applies a dot while also pushing enemies back, heals yourself for some of the damage dealt, causes additional dots for each enemy hit, and hits twice in a row if skilled. Flamethrower. Not only can you be Gandalf if you want to, no, you can also be a World War II flamethrower soldier if you ever wanted to be one, with the ability Flamethrower. The ability creates a 4 meter or 13 feet fire stream which does 50% weapon damage every half second and also afflicts burning as a dot, increases in range and also increases in base damage dealt, and also deletes the cooldown of the ability if skilled. Burnout, a dash which is a great escape tool and a good damage source, also applies a dot when you hit enemies directly with it or if they are standing close to it, reduces cooldowns for each enemy hit and extends its reach if skilled. Great pairings for the fire staff are the Rapier, the Musket, the Ice Gauntlet and also the Void Gauntlet. Do you like to save your mates from their own incompetence or your own? Or do you just like to be the class with the most nerfs? Then the heal staff is your shiny new friend. So as you might have guessed, the life staff is used by healers. And that is why you will only need focus if you want to play the life staff as your attribute. The playstyle is obviously the one of a healer, which can differ a little bit. You could play as a full healer that only heals, which also is categorized in single target healers and AoE healers, or you play as a DPS or tank healer hybrid build, where you focus more on damage than healing people. You have a great variety, which is really great, and the cooldowns are rather short with some exceptions to that. You could also put an ember in a specific weapon you want to play, so it scales with focus and not with the attribute it would normally scale with, which makes healers pretty fun to play because you could pair your life staff with every other weapon and it would work. Divine Embrace heals a single target for 120% weapon damage. Costs less mana, heals one additional target if you heal an ally that is under 50%, and if the new heal heals another target under 50% life, heals a third target if skilled. Sacred Grounds creates an area that heals everyone for 16% weapon damage per second if standing inside it, regenerates mana and stamina, and heals for 50% more if skilled. Splash of Light heals yourself and all group members in a 100 meter radius or 330 feet. If you heal someone who has less than 50% life, gain mana back. Also removes one debuff when it heals if skilled. Orb of Protection, a projectile that grants Fortify, heals and does some good damage. If you hit an ally, grants Recovery if skilled. Projectile affects all allies within 3 meters or 10 feet if skilled. Light's Embrace heals a single target, gains extra heal for each buff the target has. When you heal with Light's Embrace, the target gains stamina. You gain mana back, which scales with the amount of buffs the target has and increases buffs if skilled. Beacon, a projectile that does a good amount of damage, which attaches to an enemy or ally and heals allies in its range. Gets bigger, lasts longer and applies haste if skilled. For weapon pairings, the life staff is very versatile, though right now I would recommend using the Void Gauntlet because it is pretty OP and a very awesome fit for healers, but with the Ember, as I told you before, you can play every weapon you like as a healer. If you ever dreamed of being Elsa, even though you are a 40-year-old fat nerd with a hairy chest, then the Ice Gauntlet lets you live the Elsa dream at least a little bit. The Ice Gauntlet is mainly used by damage dealers and scales exclusively with intelligence. The effective range reaches from short to close range, and even though a little bit into the mid-range, though I would not recommend playing there with the Ice Gauntlet. The playstyle is a medium-paced one with a mix in cooldown lengths, so you have really short ones and also really long cooldowns, and some in between. The Ice Gauntlet focuses on slows and roots, as well as on some debuffing. Wind Chill, an ability that is a little bit similar to the flamethrower ability from the Fire Staff. You blast a small AoE stream of chilling winds that pushes enemies back and does 20% weapon damage. You can move during the ability and do more damage the further the enemy is standing away from you. Increases the duration and damage if skilled. Ice Spike, a giant ice spike that can deal a shit ton of damage if used correctly. You push back enemies with this ability and you are able to cancel it at any reach of the ability with a left click. Increases damage, lowers the cooldowns, adds stagger and adds ice shards for even more damage if skilled. Ice Storm, a bubble of freezing winds in which enemies get slowed and take damage every 0.3 seconds. Increases incoming damage and decreases cost when on full mana. Ice Shower, the fuck you to all melee builds in New World. This ability is an ice wall that roots everyone who is hit by it for 1 second. When the root ends, slows for 50% for 3 seconds, increases abilities duration, increases movement speed when entering or an ally, and applies rend if skilled. Ice Pylon, an ice turret that is stationary and attacks targets in its radius. Increases damage, adds life generation for the turret, and dodging increases damage. Every successful hit increases the lifetime and doubles the turret's health, thus increasing its range if skilled. Entombed. If you ever played Overwatch and played Mei a lot, you will love this ability. Like in Overwatch, you get into a giant ice tomb, which unlike in Overwatch, thank God, has a health bar, so you can't sit in there forever. Though while in the ice tomb you regenerate mana very fast and take no damage yourself. You can cancel the ice tomb at any time by pressing light attack, and while you do so, you damage people nearby. Increases its defense and cleanses all debuffs if skilled. When it comes to the weapon pairings, the Fire Staff or the Void Gauntlet are great options, but also the Rapier or the Heal Staff can be an interesting choice. And last but not least, the newest addition to the New World roster, the Void Gauntlet. If you are a bit more of the edgelord kind of guy and might be in a guild called
Dark Synthetics,
then the Void Gauntlet might hit right home into your edgy dark soul. Or you just want to use the hands down best secondary weapon for healers, or the most unbalanced and OP broken one. The primary attribute the Void Gauntlet uses is intelligence, and the secondary attribute is focus, which makes it one of the only 2 weapons that scales with it. So this weapon is perfect for healers or damage dealers that like to use vamp builds and life leeching. The playstyle focuses a lot on life leeching and melee range, which is kinda unique for a mage kind of weapon. The cooldowns have medium to long lengths because they are very impactful. Petrifying Scream, one of the best roots in game, if not the best root in game, which lasts 2 seconds and does some damage and also staggers the target if hit. Increases its duration, grants 45 for each enemy hit if skilled. The Halo Blade, or how New World calls it, the Void Blade. An ability that creates a Void Blade which makes it able to block and reduces the damage absorption from enemies for each hit. Grants Fortify, higher critical damage and lifesteal if skilled. Oblivion, an AoE circle that deals damage every second and increases your damage and group members' damage for 20%. Also applies Weaken if you hit enemies who are standing inside of Oblivion, and grants 15 stamina each second if skilled. Baleful Tether. You fire a projectile which applies a void chain if hit that weakens the target for each second while empowering yourself. The chain Chain breaks if the target is too far away, decreases cooldown, grants 100% more mana regeneration, and grants lifesteal on kill if skilled. Orb of Decay, another Overwatch ability. If you ever played Mora in Overwatch, you will love this ability. You create an orb that deals AoE damage and also applies Disintegrate. When it reaches its maximum travel distance, bounces back as a healing orb and does AoE healing. You can explode your orb to do damage if the orb is still in its damage phase, or do healing if the orb is in its healing phase if skilled. Also slows enemies and gain mana for each enemy hit if skilled. Essence Rupture, a projectile that if hit creates a life leech for yourself and your group, gives 20% of damage dealt back as health. Also gives stamina back and heals in a radius when the effect ends if skilled. The Void Gauntlet is the best secondary weapon for healers and currently one of the best and strongest weapons in game in general. So other awesome pairings besides the Life Staff would be the Ice Gauntlet, the Rapier, the Fire Staff, or any other weapon because it's so strong. You could also play it with a musket, a bow, a spear. I saw everything with this weapon. So seems like everything is working, so just try out what you want. Thank you all for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are still here, wow, thank you a lot for your time and that you watched the video till the end. Or maybe you just skipped, and thank you also for just watching what you needed to watch. I hope that helped you a little bit. And if you want to see more guides for New World, then leave me a like or just tell me in the comments down below for what you want to see a New World guide. Maybe you have a specific topic that maybe you want a guide for, or just maybe New World content in general. And if you don't want to miss all of that, then feel free to subscribe if you want to. And also a big thank you to Aboran, who helped me with some scenes and some healer knowledge, as well as a thank you to Dynosis, who also helped me with healer knowledge, and with Dynosis, who also helped me with one scene. I wish you all an awesome day. I hope that you are happy, because that is the most important thing, and if not, then it will get better soon, I promise you. I like you whoever you are, and leb wohl!